Gets Better, the Improvisational Storytelling podcast, where every week a friend or two journey together via the internet and we tell stories to you, our millions of listeners. I am, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And we are here to tell you a story. Well, mostly to recap a story. I think we're recapping last week's story, right? Is that the plan?
Yep. We had 3 episodes of the Guild of Weights and Measures.
Yeah. And we are here now to sort of give a little bit of a talk about it and see how we felt like it went and talk about any of our inspirations. No Seth tonight, just us, just you and I.
Okay.
So, what did you think about it, Reed?
Well, it brought up a real interesting idea. As far as something to write a story about.
Right.
And it's something so near to what's going on in the world today. And that's the whole notion of confidence in institutions.
Right. I didn't even think of that.
You know, when you have the breakdown of the system, whatever was leading up to the depression type things, and here we are in an alternate reality where it's really broken down to the point where there's just no recovering. And so they're trying to, people still have to eat. So people know that, well, if I grow and produce food, there's going to be interest in it, but how am I going to be remunerated for my efforts and for my my expenditures?
Yeah.
So then it just gets real basic when I know the one thing that I got to have is I got to have some labor. So if somebody wants to have food for their family, they can come and help me for a little bit, and we can figure out what's fair, and you work out things like that. And then we got to move this, the produce, we got to move it to a town or a city. So somebody is, somebody's got a truck and, got to have a means of exchange so that make this all happen.
Right.
And then this whole notion of, I love the character, the famous person that Seth introduced, Reginald Fiddler.
Fiddler, yeah.
Yeah. Because, it was almost like a monastic order of the guild. And the idea was to establish an absolutely untouchable, incorruptible sort of brotherhood that would keep the whole notion of weights and measures fair and honest and balanced. And that way that you could be sure that a measure of wheat is the same here as in Chicago, as in New York, as in New Orleans,
Right, exactly.
This a lot of the story is kind of based around that, of trying to establish, the kind of a bedrock notion that we've got institutions that are going to work for bringing order to society. And I think it's so interesting, now where people are questioning a lot of our basic institutions, like, hey, the professionals that have been running the education system, maybe we're not getting the results we should be getting. And what's happening with law enforcement? And what's happening,
What's happening with the stock market?
Yeah.
What's happening with big corporate? See, that's the thing I was thinking of, is that while there are, like you said, it's kind of a picture of today. It's like more and more that I read news and look and experience life, more and more I see people trying to not to break the law necessarily, but to twist the definition of the law to suit themselves.
Yes.
This our bad guy, what was his name? Sylvester or Chester?
Sylvester, yeah.
Sylvester. He wasn't necessarily trying to be a criminal. He was just trying to kind of muddy the waters about what was right and wrong. He didn't try to, not until later, to actually become a criminal, but he just tried to muddy the waters of, like, what does it really mean? How much is a bushel of wheat actually?
And then the whole notion of, like, where there still needs to be a labor market.
Right.
And if you don't have a reasonable means of, exchange such that, well, we will pay you this much an hour, that won't mean anything if the currency doesn't mean anything.
Right.
And then there's the notion of, well, you guys could get together a labor gang, a labor crew, and then contract for blocks of commodities for the use of that labor. Well, okay, that's fine. That's all well and good. That presupposes that the person doing the contracting is seeing to the needs of his workers.
Right.
Well, Sylvester gets into the whole gray area of where you got people who are vulnerable and they want to figure out a way to feed their kids, and then they all they've got to trade is their time and
Themselves.
effort, and
Yeah.
it goes into that slippery category of when does it become slave labor?
Yeah, I think about, I'm not an expert on the history of slavery in America, but I think about the fact that there were a lot, from what I've read, there were a lot of people that came over to America under contracts of indentured servitude.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, people who, in essence, sold themselves for a certain number of years or a certain quantity of work,
Yeah.
And what did it take? Where did it go wrong? Well,
Yeah.
partially it went wrong because slavery was already an established thing,
Right.
But what did it go wrong in the beginning? All it went wrong is for people to say, "Oh wow, all I have to do is not pay these guys, and I can just keep them under lock and key, and they're mine."
Yeah.
So this Sylvester could have started off just doing labor contracts, indentured servitude contracts, and then just kind of moved in. It's just the next opportunistic course to increase profits and decrease losses.
Like,
Um,
yeah, kind of like, what the? I thought I was going to work for 5 years and then have this paid off, and now I'm stuck.
yeah, yeah. Um, I was also thinking of where the story went with the whole kind of reality breaking apart thing.
Right.
I really like that because it's really reminiscent, and I didn't get to bring up any examples, but it's really reminiscent of the Dark Tower series by Stephen King, which is an excellent, excellent series.
Yes.
I did a little bit when I explained reality breaking down, but there's this kind of cool concept or this cool thought process or thought experiment where he talks about how distances and time kind of break down, you
Right.
know? So we could have written in this story that it took them 2.5 years to travel from St. Paul, Minneapolis to New Orleans, where really it would only take about 3 months if you're, you know, riding a riverboat down.
Right.
And it's just, I've always been intrigued by sort of far-reaching post-apocalyptic systems that kind of break into the everyday world,
Yeah.
And Dark Tower kind of checks all the boxes for me personally.
Yeah.
And I was trying to reminiscence some of that thought process with this kind of Elliot, this guy who was really uncorruptible.
Right.
He really was completely and utterly on the track that he was on. There was no way to break him off of it. And in some ways, like Roland Deschain of Gilead from the Dark Tower series,
Yes.
he was on his way to the tower and that's what he was going to do, and he sidetracked once or twice, but ultimately his job was the tower, And so I kind of feel like if I'd gotten sad ending, I think I would have tried a little bit more of a tragic ending with this one, where he just gets to the main area, instead of setting up the rose granite to be the new lodestone, the new source of reality. He just, I don't know. I was just thinking about what I would do if I did a sad ending rather than a happy ending.
Yeah.
Let me think here. I feel like Grayson, my beautiful cat, was really underutilized.
Yeah.
And it's really my own fault. I just should have written him in some more space. But he was a great idea, and maybe he'll be a reoccurring character sometime in the future.
Yeah, I like Grayson. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
My sister had a Maine Coon, and she was at the zoo with her friend, and there was a lynx, and he said, "Look, that's Luther on steroids." She had a big, beautiful,
big gray.
fluffy. Hers was yellow, but it was a beautiful cat.
The gray Maine Coons. If I could have one of those cat. Unfortunately, my wife is is allergic, so I don't think Maine Coons are hypoallergenic. Did you draw from any story inspirations of other stories you've written for this read? The whole lodestone thing, there was a D&D game I used to listen to called Critical Role, and there was a brief part of that where they had to go down into this ocean and recover these lodestones in order to sort of seal back the plane of water.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where my brain was about when when I had kind of came up with that idea. And then that article I was talking to you about where they were taking that piece of silica and polishing it and grinding it
Yes.
so that they knew exactly how many molecules were in it in order to redefine a kilogram, which I think is really cool.
I was absolutely inspired by Card, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son.
Yeah.
You know that series where I remember there was one, the guy had the knack. They had the knack, you know,
Right.
he had the knack for stone cutting, and he cut a millstone, you know, and he was able to sense the grain of the rock so that it wouldn't flake or
Yeah,
fracture,
absolutely.
you know. And so with the push pull, see, I first got the idea when you introduced the magic system push pull stop, which of course I also thought of was that
Mistborn.
Mistborn, yes.
Yes.
Was that Sanderson?
Yeah, that was Brandon Sanderson. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, what a great story.
I haven't read it yet. I've
Okay,
only been
well,
just been told about it.
yeah, no, okay. I won't go into it because I don't want to spoiler alert. It's absolutely worth reading. I think I might have it. If I'll dig it out of my shelves somewhere for you.
Okay.
Okay, and well then, yeah, and then I went to the seventh son of the seventh son. You know where people would one of the things they were in their family they were uh diviners. They were able to use like a forked willow branch, and it would, you know, tell them where to dig a well. Well, as the story progressed, you know, this family are following this family, and the one guy had a real specific kind of knack for how to handle stone, and that's what my character Samuel Stone, the stonecutter, son and grandson of and great grandson of stonecutters. What I wanted to do is to make this antique hero in you know, had an industry that was very concrete and tangible and, you know, quantifiable, right? So
Right.
that he had kind of he had a fairly stable existence even in the midst of the troubles, because there were still need to do some building, still need to repair old building. There were, you know, and they had the quarry on their property, and you know, it's like I say, it's easily they were dealing in products and services that were very easily quantifiable. So he was pretty content, and he was, you know, anxiety free basis as far as the basis of his livelihood. But then the whole dream sequence thing upset the apple cart for him,
Right.
so he got pulled into the story more.
I was just thinking, this Elliot guy who is the hero kind of came without conflict. Like there was no real part of him that had conflict. And my brain always says that a hero has to have conflict. Do you think I'm trying to think of a story where the hero is kind of set in his ways, already powerful, already realized, you know?
Yeah.
I can't really think of one. It's like, is that part of the story that the hero needs to like sort of come into his own as well?
I I kinda like, you know, I thought of when you were talking just now, I was thinking of, uh, Galad in, Wheel of Time.
Oh
He was
yeah.
kind of, you know, he would fall on the thing as, you know, lawful good, right?
Right.
Very linear, concrete, linear in the way he approached things. There's right and wrong, black and white. You know, of course, he gravitated to the Children of the Light because they had, you know, just their rigid uh,
Right.
thing, you know, and that I guess that was who I thought of.
Well, I was just thinking of Jack Ryan.
Oh,
You know, it's like, did Jack Ryan ever? I mean, clearly he struggled. I haven't read any of his books. You'd be able to answer this for me. But every time I hear about him, he's going off and doing something heroic,
well,
right?
right.
Right? He doesn't. The first Jack Ryan book isn't about Jack Ryan, the basic training recruit.
Right.
You know, he's like already a confirmed hero.
Yes.
You know, and all it is just further pictures of his exploits. And I think that's really kind of interesting. I was trying to think of who else, what
Yeah,
other stories that I've read that's like that. You know, Wheel of Time, no. Lord of the Rings, kind of. You know,
the backstory on Jack Ryan is something that I was thinking of when we first exactly an illustration I thought of. Jesuit trained, Boston College, graduate school at Georgetown. Catholic, very clear. A clear, lawful good sort of upbringing, and I think that helped
Right.
shape his character.
right.
And I just was thinking, like, when I was thinking about institutions, like there was a time when the FBI was largely populated with Jesuit trained Irish Catholics, Boston University, Georgetown, and kind of incorruptible was the kind of the image. Like, Nixon didn't when Nixon bugged the Watergate, he didn't call on the FBI to do it because he knew they would tell him to pound sand. Because
Right.
I mean,
Right.
they wouldn't be, they couldn't bend the rules like that.
Right. But here now, maybe in our modern day, maybe they can bend the rules.
Well, okay then.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. Well, exactly. I don't know. I always feel like you're going to admonish me because I always have political opinions that I think it'd be best if we left out of our stories.
yeah, no, I mean, those things paint a picture of who you are. So, you say that about the FBI now, but, people.
I still in my heart want to believe that there's a whole bunch of FBI guys that, are all about the good and the right and the true, and they mean to be about, they were attracted to the whole notion of, rule of law and upholding law to be the bedrock of freedom. And, and how is it that, there seems to be corruption?
Yeah, a famous person said, I won't say his name, but a famous person said, "Don't worry, guys, it's not Hitler." A famous person said, "Organized peace does not happen by accident."
Right.
Right? Things do not, left unattended, things do not get better. They only get worse.
Right.
It's only through the direct action of man or of humans do things get better, roads paved on purpose, so I was just thinking about, like I was saying, stories where the hero is kind of already established, you know Lord of the Rings was one I was thinking about.
Yes.
Frodo, while thinking that his journey was over when he got to Rivendell, was ready to bring it the rest of the way. Because he wasn't quite sure what that meant. He kind of knew what it meant, but you can tell through the whole story that he doesn't quite know what that means.
Yeah.
I
am old enough so that I had the experience of the Lord of the Rings before the movies. So,
yeah.
But I remember being struck as almost a pivotal moment in the whole story was the Council of Elrond at Rivendell, where all the people from the different, the guy Boromir from Minas Tirith, Aragorn, the Gimli the dwarf, the elves, the hobbits, and they're, it's kind of all laid out and okay, now what do we do? And Frodo just says, "I will take the ring," Frodo said, "though I do not know the way." And isn't that the story of the beginning of any hero?
Yeah. I mean, that's Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
I will take the ring. I do not know the way.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting. I just read the whole series recently. It's so interesting as Frodo really just kind of bumbles his way into Mordor.
Right.
Right? He trusts Smeagol, Gollum, when he shouldn't.
And he gets set up, and
Sam is sitting there pulling his hair out like, we can't trust him. He's gonna kill us. And Frodo is just like, you kind of have to. It's that's what time it is. Time to trust. Who's another one? Ransom. Ransom.
Oh.
Is his name from Stephen C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy.
Yes.
That's another hero that came in completely and totally, like, he was the same man before he walked up to the house
Yes.
as he was on what was the first planet? Malacandra?
Right.
Yeah, he was the same man.
Yes.
And yet it became more confirmed and it kind of shone through more, but there was no, we all love a sort of comeuppance story, starts off as a weakling, has the training montage, becomes a strong person.
Yeah.
But it's also kind of refreshing just to have a person like Aragorn, right, in the Lord of the Rings, or Lan, Alan, what's his name?
Mandragoran.
Yeah, Mandragoran from the Wheel of Time series, or Moraine.
Right.
Right? Who don't ever need to get more powerful, right?
Yes.
That story's happened already. The story isn't about them getting more powerful. The story is about how these really powerful people are standing up for what's right.
Right.
Anyways, that's just a thing I was thinking about as I try to think about how to, do these and do our short stories that we're working on and write these, I say, but come up with these stories in a way that's interesting and engaging. I don't want to follow like the same beaten path of storytelling just over and over and over again with different names.
Yeah.
And I mean, who knows if it sells books if it ain't broke.
Yeah, and there's that.
But that's one of the things I love so much about the Dark Tower series is that, Roland Deschain of Gilead, the main, I would say, protagonist and possibly also the main antagonist of the story, he just kind of comes into the story and he's just like this force that doesn't change or changes very little. And all of the tertiary characters who are important and part of the story have to just kind of deal with him for whoever and whatever he is.
Yes.
A bit more like Gandalf.
Mm-hmm.
Except Gandalf has some humanity, he like apologizes and messes up and laughs and stuff like that.
A wizard is never late. He always arrives just when he means to.
Yes. So that's all I think I have for this story. It was really good. I would read it. I'd read this story.
Yeah.
Especially if it had like sort of folklore / American, because it's like an alt American history story. If it had lots of alt American history in it, of around the Depression and that era, and then mix in this kind of weird magic system.
Yeah.
At first, I thought for our first episode, I had them going into Appalachia, which I really like a lot. I like Appalachia a lot, but going to New Orleans is just fine.
Yeah.
But
I was in a church choir once with a guy who was literally from Appalachia. He was from Eastern Kentucky, and he grew up in an area that he called Up the Holler, and and it was literally like real rough country and impassable. There was one road in, and that was it. And then they had just a community of a few houses, and it took some serious mountaineering to cross any direction into an area where other people lived, unless you went out by the main road.
Right.
And so he had that huge desire to get out and see the world, so to speak, as he was.
Yeah, that makes sense. And now I can't help but just want to live in that little community.
Right. Have some chickens, plenty of deadfall, for your wood stove.
Yeah. Lots of clay.
Yeah.
Lots of little gullies where you can make as much moonshine as you need to.
Yeah. Yeah, you can tinker around with growing the very best tobacco.
Yep.
Yep. Leaf, long bottom leaf.
Whatever.
Yep.
Seed bearing fruit, my friend. Seed bearing
Yeah.
fruit.
Yep. And back up in the hills, you have your still set up, way back up so the revenuers can't find it.
Yeah. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this recap episode. If you liked this story, email me or at me on Twitter. Let me know your favorite part of this story or how we could make it better. Our email address is waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com. Our Twitter is @getsbettercast. If you email me, I'll probably reply. If you at me on Twitter, I will definitely heart it. I might reply depending on the content. Join us next week as we start another story. And hopefully Seth will be back. All right. We'll see you later. Bye, guys.